I never thought the worst part of losing my mom would be watching someone else step into her life like it was his all along. My name is June Elwood. I'm 24, a public school teacher in a small town outside Salem, Oregon. Until a month ago, my mom and I lived on the same land our family had owned for nearly a century. 100 acres of woods, pasture, and this beat-up white farmhouse with peeling shutters and blackberry vines that climbed higher than the windows. She passed away from a stroke just 2 weeks before her 61st birthday. Her mind had been slipping for a while. Alzheimer's runs in our family. But the suddenness of her death still broke something in me. One minute I was helping her button her blouse before a checkup. The next I was signing papers in a funeral home. Grief is strange. It hits like a quiet car crash. You look fine on the outside, but everything's been totaled inside. The day after her funeral, my Uncle Dean showed up at the front porch. Now, some context. Dean is my mom's younger brother. He left town 15 years ago after a huge falling out with her. Something to do with money and inheritance. Details my mom never liked to revisit. I was 9. I remembered his loud voice, the way he always smelled like too much cologne and bad decisions. But there he was, on the porch, with his luggage. "I figured you could use the help," he said like it was the most natural thing in the world. Family steps up. I didn't have the strength to argue. The funeral had drained me. And besides, part of me thought maybe he had changed. For a week, he was surprisingly respectful. Helped me sort old papers, mowed the back field, even made a mean peach cobbler like Mom used to. But then things shifted. It started with the small things. He took over Mom's old bedroom without asking. He started referring to the house as the Elwood Estate, in a tone that made my stomach twist. He invited himself to meetings with the lawyer handling Mom's will, even though no one had asked him to. One afternoon, I walked into the kitchen to find him on the phone, loudly telling someone, "It's a prime property, untouched land. She doesn't know what she's doing with it." I froze. He saw me and ended the call quickly. "Who are you talking to?" I asked. "Just someone interested in maybe buying the Northfield," he said casually, like he hadn't just started marketing my family's home before I'd even figured out how to sort Mom's prescriptions. "Mom left the farm to me," I said, more to remind myself than him. He smiled. "You sure about that?" That's when it began. The next morning, I got a call from our family attorney. Dean had submitted a new version of Mom's will, dated just 6 weeks before she died. In it, she'd supposedly signed everything over to him. The land, the equipment, even the old barn she used as a quilting studio. I couldn't breathe. "This can't be real," I whispered. She could barely remember my name some days. "I know," the lawyer said gently. "But the signature's there. It was notarized. I stared at the wall like it might start bleeding. 6 weeks before she died, my mom couldn't follow a grocery list. I had to tie her shoes some mornings. She once called me her sister and cried when I corrected her. There's no way she had the mental clarity to rewrite a legal document. But no one else seemed to care. Dean had paperwork, a notary, a smug smile. The town saw a grieving brother stepping up. I saw a predator circling the one thing I had left of my mother. And the worst part? That night, I found the letter Mom wrote me when she was first diagnosed. She tucked it in the drawer of her nightstand under her rosary and a photo of us from my high school graduation. "If I forget who you are, promise me you won't forget who I was," she wrote. "I want you to have this land. You'll know what to do with it when I'm gone." I cried until my throat burned. But I didn't stop there. Because 2 days later, while sorting her old sewing supplies, I opened a box of fabric scraps. And something inside it changed everything. It wasn't cloth. It was a tape recorder. And it still had a cassette inside. I sat there for almost an hour, just staring at that old tape recorder. It was one of those cheap handheld things Mom used to record herself reading bedtime stories for my cousins, back when they lived with us for a summer. The cassette inside had her handwriting on it in faded Sharpie. "Tuesday, don't forget." My hands were shaking when I hit play. The audio was rough, a little fuzzy at first. I heard the creak of her favorite chair. Then her voice. God, it was her voice, slow and hesitant, but unmistakably her. I think Dean came today. Said something about a paper. He wants me to sign it. I asked him what for, but he just said it was for the land. That June doesn't have time for it. She paused. There was a soft breath like she was whispering into nothing. I don't remember saying yes, but my hand hurts. I stopped the tape. I couldn't breathe. I played it again. And again. And then I recorded the audio onto my phone and backed it up 3 different ways because I knew this was the proof no one else would care to find. The next morning, I called the attorney. His name was Clay Benning, a man in his 60s who'd known my mom since they were kids. He sounded surprised when I told him about the recording. I didn't know she was even coherent enough to make tapes, he said. She wasn't, I said. Not consistently, that's the point. He asked me to bring the tape in. I did. He listened. He got real quiet. I'll look into this, he finally said. But it'll be hard to undo what's already filed. Dean had already filed everything. Title transfer, equipment lists. The new deed had his name on it now. The farm truck, the silo, even Mom's old chicken coop that leaned to the left like it had had a long day. When I drove back to the house that night, the gate was chained shut. There was a for sale sign by the road. My heart dropped. I called Dean. No answer. So I drove around to the back pasture, parked by the ditch, and hiked through the woods like I used to do as a kid when I snuck out to stargaze. I reached the side porch. The lights were on. I knocked once. Dean opened the door holding a glass of whiskey like he was expecting me. You shouldn't be here, he said. Why is the property listed for sale? I asked. Because I own it now, he said, flat. It's too much land for one person. I'm making smart use of it. You forged her signature, I snapped. He didn't even blink. She signed it. You can ask the notary. She didn't know what she was signing. Well, then that's on her, isn't it? I wanted to hit him. I wanted to scream. But I just stood there, vibrating with anger. He leaned against the doorframe. You think people are going to believe the quiet daughter who moved out and played teacher in the city? Or the grieving brother who came back to take care of his dying sister? I stared at him, stunned. He smiled. Exactly. I turned and walked away before I did something I'd regret. But what really broke me happened the next day. I went to the sheriff's office to file a formal complaint. I brought the tape. I brought Mom's medical records from the memory care clinic. I even printed the notes from her neurologist stating she'd lost decision-making capacity 8 weeks before her death. I thought I'd done everything right. The officer on duty took my papers, skimmed through them, then sighed. I'm sorry, Miss Elwood, he said, but unless you can prove coercion or mental incapacitation at the time of signing, and unless the notary is willing to recant, this looks airtight. But I have proof. He cut me off. Look, I'm not saying I believe him, but the law cares about signatures, not feelings. I sat in my car outside that station, crying like a damn child, like the kind of cry that comes from your ribs, not your eyes. And that's when my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered. Is this June Elwood? A woman asked. Yes. I used to work at Rose Valley, the care center your mom was at. My heart stopped. I heard what your uncle did, she said, voice low. And I think you need to know something. She paused. That notary? The one who stamped the new will? He's not just some random witness. She took a shaky breath. He's Dean's drinking buddy. I've seen him at the bar. And the day your mom signed that paper? She didn't even know what year it was. I couldn't speak. I wanted to say something sooner, she whispered, but I was fired a week later. I think he pulled strings. I was just scared. And just like that, the whole thing cracked open. Because now I had something no signature could cover. A witness. And maybe, just maybe, enough to burn everything he built on her grave. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until the cassette clicked inside the recorder and the audio cut off. That voice, my mom's voice, cracked right through me. Worn down, confused, struggling to piece her world together. But even through all of it, you could hear the fear, the hesitation. Like she knew something wasn't right, but couldn't find the words to fight back. I sat there in the middle of her sewing room, surrounded by faded spools of thread and fabric scraps that still smelled like lavender dryer sheets, and I swear I felt her in the room with me. I was angry. No, furious. But more than that, I was heartbroken. She'd been so alone. I thought I'd been protecting her by staying close, helping with meds, driving her to appointments. But I wasn't there that day. I didn't even know he'd taken her anywhere. Dean had always been slick with words, but now I had her words. And that changed everything. I spent the next 2 days in overdrive. I scanned the audio, backed it up, took it to a lawyer friend of my old college roommate, someone outside our small-town bubble. She said what I suspected. This recording didn't replace a legal document, but it sure as hell could undermine one in court, especially if there were patterns of behavior. Witnesses, bank transfers, property evaluations, all happening in a tight little window. So I dug deeper. And what I found, it made my blood run cold. Dean hadn't just listed the land for sale. He'd already secured a private buyer, some out-of-state investment group specializing in agricultural land acquisition. They'd submitted an offer, a cash offer, and he'd accepted, which meant if I didn't do something fast, I wouldn't just lose the house. I'd lose the barn, the woods where my mom taught me to track deer prints, the tree swing Dad built before he died, the land our family had tended for 3 generations. I barely slept. I barely ate. I was emailing, printing, calling. At one point, I drove 2 hours just to get a photocopy of Mom's original will from a distant cousin she'd once mailed it to for safekeeping. Then came the breaking point. I went back to the property, just to see it again before it slipped away. Maybe say goodbye. That's when I saw them. 2 men I didn't recognize walking the field with clipboards and phones. They were taking photos, laughing. One of them pointed to the house and mimicked a bulldozer. I walked straight up to them. "Excuse me, who are you?" The taller one looked me up and down. "Survey crew, just doing a pre-development check." "Pre-what?" He didn't blink. The buyer's tearing it all down, converting into storage units and distribution. I stood there, absolutely numb. "They're bulldozing it?" I choked. "It's old stuff," he shrugged. "They'll probably level it within the month." I left without saying another word. I sat in my car and stared at the wheel for a full 10 minutes before my body remembered how to breathe. And then I called the only person I hadn't yet, my mom's old friend, Nancy, from church. She didn't hesitate. "I didn't want to get in the middle," she said, her voice shaking. "But I was there the day he brought her into the bank to update account access. She was so disoriented, June. She didn't even know her birthday. I told the manager something felt off." "Did he report it?" "I don't know," she whispered. "But I'll talk if someone asks. I've been praying someone would." I was finally piecing it all together. The forged will, the coerced bank access, the shady buyer, the notary who drank with Dean every Thursday night at the landing. It wasn't just betrayal. It was calculated. He'd been working this for months, waiting for her to fade just far enough. And the worst part? He almost got away with it. But I wasn't done. Because the next morning, I opened an envelope I hadn't noticed at the bottom of the sewing box. No label. Just folded paper. Inside was a handwritten letter in Mom's shaky script. "If you're reading this and things feel wrong, trust that they are. Dean came again. He was nice. Too nice. Said things I don't quite understand. But if I'm not here anymore, and he's still around, protect what matters. Trust your gut, Junebug. I love you." I broke. Right there on the floor of the hallway. Full body sobs. The kind where you don't know if you're crying from grief or rage or just finally realizing how close you came to losing everything. I don't know who needs to hear this, but if you've ever been the quiet one in the family, the one no one listens to until it's too late, please know you're not crazy, you're not weak, and you are not alone. Some people manipulate with charm and silence, but we fight with truth. And sometimes all it takes is pressing play. The morning after I found Mom's letter, I stopped crying. I didn't stop hurting. That part still burned like an open nerve. But something in me clicked, like grief had finally given way to fury. Quiet, calculating fury. I stopped answering Dean's calls. I stopped trying to convince anyone of anything. I just started collecting. First stop was Clay Benning's office, the old lawyer who'd reluctantly validated Dean's new will. I brought the cassette, the letter, the notarized dates, and 2 names. Nancy from church and Dana, the fired nurse from Mom's care center. He listened, said nothing for a long time. Then he took off his glasses and said, "This could blow everything wide open." He agreed to file an injunction, but it would take time. The sale was scheduled to finalize in 14 days, so that became the window. 14 days to build a case strong enough to make the court freeze the deal. 14 days to prove my mom wasn't just old and confused. She was taken advantage of, and Dean knew it. I made a list of everyone who'd crossed paths with Mom in her final 6 months. The bank clerk, the physical therapist, the woman who delivered her prescriptions. I drove 2 counties over to track down the notary, only to find his office temporarily closed for repairs. I printed screenshots of his Facebook, photos of him and Dean drinking beers at the landing. One post with the caption, "Business and bourbon, baby." I timestamped everything. Meanwhile, Dean must have sensed I was up to something. On day 7, he left a voicemail. "Let it go, Junebug. You're gonna make yourself sick. It's just land." That night, I dug out Mom's gardening gloves. Dirt still clung to the seams. I slept with them on my nightstand like armor. By day 10, I had affidavits from 5 people willing to testify that Mom wasn't mentally competent during the time the new will was signed. Even her hairdresser remembered Mom asking, "Have you seen my husband?" Dad's been dead for 18 years. Still, it felt like a race against time. I knew Dean was fast-tracking everything. He had connections, old drinking buddies on the county board, a cousin in the real estate office. If I blinked, I'd lose everything before the ink dried. Then came day 13. Clay called. The judge agreed to hear us. One condition, you need to appear in person with everything. Tomorrow. Tomorrow was the sale day. The farm would be officially transferred to this faceless investment group at noon. We had a hearing at 9. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the field behind the property, technically Dean's land now, and just stood there in the cold. The barn loomed in the dark. The swing my dad built creaked in the wind. And I made a decision. I wasn't just fighting for soil and buildings. I was fighting for memory. For proof that my mom wasn't crazy or careless or senile like they whispered. She knew something was wrong. She tried to warn me. So I dressed in her old denim jacket the next morning and showed up to court with a box of files and a cassette player. Dean showed up late. Hair slicked back. Grinning like a man who already spent the check. But when the judge played that tape, Mom's voice, trembling, scared, real, you could feel the shift in the room. Dean looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under him. Then Clay handed the judge an envelope. "We also have newly submitted medical records," he said, "and surveillance stills." Dean's face twisted. "What surveillance?" And that's when I dropped it. See, during my deep dive into Mom's final days, I remembered something. The gas station down the street from Rose Valley Care Center? The one she used to walk to for sunflower seeds before she forgot how to count coins? They had cameras. And 6 weeks before she died, the day Dean claimed she signed the will, those cameras caught him. He wasn't walking beside her. He was dragging her, arm locked through hers, her face blank, barefoot. She didn't even have her teeth in. I got the footage. The judge didn't say much. He just looked at Dean, then looked at me and said, "Sale is frozen. Pending further investigation." Dean exploded, called it a witch hunt, said I was emotional, hysterical, manipulated. But no one listened. For the first time, they listened to me. Afterward, I sat alone in my car and just stared at the dashboard. I should have felt triumphant. But all I felt was empty. I didn't want to win like this. I wanted my mom. I wanted a world where she hadn't been forgotten, dismissed, pushed aside in her final days by people who saw her as an inconvenience. If you've ever watched someone you love fade away while everyone else just moved on without them, I see you. You're not alone. And if someone tried to erase them like they were never here, fight. Even if your voice shakes. Even if no one believes you yet. Because sometimes the quietest daughters are the ones who burn everything down. The final hearing lasted 4 hours. I sat there, palms sweating against the cool wood of the courtroom bench, while Dean's attorney tried every trick in the book. Discredit the medical records, call the surveillance footage, taken out of context, question my motives, even imply I was mentally unstable from grief. But they didn't have her voice, and they didn't have her letter. When I read it out loud, my mom's words in that shaky, looping script, you could hear the shift in the room. Not legal arguments, not paperwork. Just a woman in the last days of her life trying to protect what little clarity she had left. Dean didn't look at me once. When the judge ruled in my favor, I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I just breathed. The new will was declared invalid. The original, leaving everything to me, was reinstated. The property sale was annulled. The buyer, who'd never met my mom, backed out the minute they realized they'd been part of something rotten. Dean? He lost more than the land. Turns out, submitting fraudulent documents and manipulating a vulnerable adult comes with consequences. He was charged with elder abuse and falsification of legal records. His assets were frozen. The notary lost his license. And suddenly, Dean had a lot fewer friends at the landing. But what hit him hardest wasn't legal. It was the silence. No one stood up for him. Not one person vouched for his good intentions. Even people who'd known us both for decades just looked away when his name came up. He tried to call me once, left a voicemail, said I was cold, that families shouldn't turn on each other like this. But the truth is, he turned first. Mom wasn't perfect. She made mistakes. She forgot birthdays, lost her patience, sometimes didn't say things that needed saying, but she showed up. She loved fiercely, even when her mind started slipping through her fingers. And what she left behind wasn't just a farm. It was a fight. A final act of defiance in a world that treats the vulnerable like a burden. Now, the land is mine. But more than that, it's safe. The barn's still leaning, the swing still creaks, the house still smells like lavender and old paint. Some days, I walk the fields and imagine her beside me. Other days, I scream into the wind because I still miss her so much it hurts. But at least now she can rest. And I can finally breathe. Because I didn't just save the land, I saved her story. And no one gets to rewrite that but me. Lesson I learned? Sometimes justice doesn't come from a courtroom. It comes when you choose to stand up, even when no one else stands with you. If you've ever had to fight to protect the memory of someone you love, whether in front of a judge or against your own family, I hope you'll share your story in the comments. I truly want to hear it. And if any part of this journey resonated with you, I hope you'll stick around. There's so much more I want to tell.